Okay, our beloved, so it took our a number of days to transcribe our last message. It was very depleting and emotional for her, as she really does not like when we speak about her and her role. But nonetheless, she finally had the courage to post it. So now, here is today's message and yesterday's and the day before. Don't be a dick has been a common theme of ours for a number of months. Honestly, years, but we shared it in a different form. And now we are moving on to a more positive message, which is, what does that look like? So, yesterday our another posted what her role is, which is simply to be love and light through her intentions and, when possible, through her actions. It is not easy to hold this vibration when you have so many painful, traumatic memories flowing through your body and you are releasing them continuously through tears as well through traumatic transgressions. And so now, what are traumatic transgressions? Traumatic transgressions is where you realize that you have hurt another because of your own trauma. So now, our another has had moments over the number of years with her children, primarily with her daughter, because her daughter triggered her. Now, her ex modeled for her what abusive behavior looked like, and she mirrored this. Now that he has been gone for a while, she is finding that she no longer engages in that type of behavior. So not only is she healing from her own trauma, but her trauma-based behavior is also dissipating, meaning that her daughter now has a more loving and engaged mother. Now, Kati did not engage in that type of behavior to the extent that he did, nor did she do it frequently, but she definitely did join the bandwagon, which is when he criticized her, she too would do the same, and on her own as well. But the most amazing revelation that she had in the recent weeks is that this is not who she was. She thought that this is who she was as a person. And she's no longer doing this because her reactions were a fear-based vibration stemming from the influence of another in her environment. And as that influence went away, her own behavior, which others would definitely deem abusive in some ways, which is verbally catalyzing someone to not feel good about themselves because they didn't do it well enough based on your standards. And our another is now really, truly working on becoming vulnerable and exposing her underside to her daughter when her daughter creates a trigger. And so instead of saying, you are this and you are that when you do that, she is learning to go within and to say, how can I support you when you are struggling? Now, the fact is, human beings are not perfect, and to hold yourself to a standard of perfection is unrealistic. Having said that, though, there's always room for improvement. And when you finally learn that your trigger response to someone else is not the other person's fault, but merely your own reaction based on your own traumatic experiences, when you realize that and you begin to work through your inner trauma, you find that you respond to the other person and you do it from a loving and compassionate space, allowing the other person the opportunity to be heard. So this is a huge shift within the parenting style within the home, and why both children love this new adaptive way of creating space for your children when they struggle. So, here is how we wish to share this knowledge with you all. When you are in a trauma-based situation or circumstance, whether you are a child or an adult, it does imprint on you. It just imprints greater when you are a child. And when you are in an abusive relationship for many, many, many years, you adapt and adopt these abusive techniques or tendencies in certain instances where you are triggered. Where you are not triggered, you can still be the same kind and loving, people-pleasing person that you've always been, right? But when you brush up against your triggers, you realize how it looks and why it looks and what you can do about it when you go within. And when you don't go within, you just simply react from that space of, this is how I have been trained to behave, and it is out of an automatic pattern versus out of a thoughtful response of listening and hearing to the other person's perspective. So why are we sharing this today when our another just said, I don't want to talk about my own personal parenting style or anything else personal? Because we want you to understand what this looks like, okay? Our another has been a wonderful mother, and you could talk with her children, and as a whole, they would say that. Her family members and her friends would say the same thing. However, she's not perfect, and when she did have her moments of irate frustration, she would take it out on the one who triggered her. And she is now really realizing that her daughter, whom she always thought was so strong and courageous, well, that she really is so tender-hearted, and that outer shell that she created was merely a filter, if you will, to make people think that she was something that she's not. But she is actually highly sensitive, highly creative, highly intuitive, and just wants to be allowed to do things in her own manner because she has a knowing about why she is here. And the home that she was living in was so oppressive for her in many ways because there was a lot of control. And now that her another's partner has left the home, our another gets to set the pace of what the parenting looks like. And it is much more expansive, much more relational, much more involved, much more personal, much more intuitive, much more creative, lighter in its approach, a lot more laughter, inappropriate jokes and things that others might not find so amusing, but within their family constellation it works beautifully. And just a whole different vibration. When one person's energy from a home environment is removed, and as things shift and filter into a new state of being, you are pretty easily able to determine how the other person affected the flow of the energy within that home. And these three individuals now are finding that the fourth person created a lot of eggshell walking and a lot of unrealistic expectations, and not, believe it or not, because the other person is a bad person himself, but because the other person is so fear-based that this is all that was comfortable in order to create a controlled environment. And now that that energy is gone, there is less desire to control the home and more fluidity and flexibility and self-expression. And in doing that, there's much healing that occurs. But the observation of, oh my gosh, the person that I was when I was parenting, where I really didn't like what I was doing, was merely a reaction to another person creating an expectation of who I was to be as a parent, how I was to control the children so the other person would feel safe and able to manage their own inner conflict. And now our another is finding her own unique way of parenting, and it is a lot through silliness, creativity, hugs and kisses, allowing the other to find their own self-expression while still creating as much as possible a structure within which all will thrive and strive for more. But it's shifting, and by next week it will be different again. So this morning, without going into detail, our another was given really wonderful advice on parenting Savannah. And that was on where she struggles. How can you incentivize her not to struggle? Because criticism and we're going to call it Catholicism, it doesn't work to, beat your child into submission and telling them what they're doing wrong and why it's wrong. It's not a good parenting style for anyone. That goes without saying. But what do you do when your child is struggling and you feel you have very little ability to control the other person's behavior because they don't desire to be controlled, because they are highly independent? Well, what do you do to move yourselves to a common goal when the other one is struggling? Well, you simply sit down and you say, how can I incentivize you? So that you involve the other person in the problem-solving or solution-oriented process, so that you're showing them that you value their opinion and their input, that you respect the fact that they know it incentivized themselves better than you do, and to just show that you care enough to listen and to be there, and not to criticize, but to say, I love you enough to say, let's figure this out. I am concerned, but how can we both move towards what our collective common goal is? Now, the issues in her home front now are minor compared to what many others are struggling with. Nonetheless, it is something that she is concerned about because it's just important to her. It's important to her to raise a child who functions well within this society, but still keeps her own independence. And how do you do that? And you do that by loving and honoring your child, respecting their voice, respecting their hurts and their traumas, as well as their own individual journey of getting to that place of healing. And it is her journey right now to go to that next phase of parenting, which is to really learn to honor her child as truly an equal in the process of healing her own inner wounds, to no longer desire to protect your child, but instead to walk alongside your child and say, I will hold your hand as you determine how to do your own healing journey, because I trust you that much now to find that inner guidance and to know how to implement it, because you know best what's right for you. Now, her daughter's almost 17, so the ability to give her daughter more rights in creating the solutions for her are appropriate. Doing this with a 3-year-old naturally would look vastly different, because they still need many more protective mechanisms around them, because they don't have the life experience, they don't have the cognitive ability, nor do they have the maturity to navigate some of the more complex life lessons. So that is it for today. Hopefully our desire to share some of our another's inner vulnerabilities will help you all to see that this is the best way to come up with a solution. It is not to force anybody to do anything against their will or even with their will, but instead to collaboratively work towards a common goal and solution. And therein you will find the lesson on how the collective can heal as well. Collaboration and not competition is the solution and is our message going forward. And when you can collaboratively move through to a common goal, you will see how simple it really was and how loving you guys really are towards one another, instead of having these caustic fights of, I know better than you what is right for me and for us and for you. So hopefully just a few of you can learn and pay it forward. And so it is. Namaste.